We are live with Leonid
You got that?
Kotov. How do I say your last name?
Kotov.
And the reason that you are here is Craig Race, who we're a big fan of, does the laneway housing stuff.
Yes, sir.
He kind of blew us away with what he's doing with laneway housing, as I'm sure he blows you away.
Yep.
And as he was leaving or we were wrapping up, he told us, we have to have you on. And that's basically all he said. But we were such a fan of his. We're like, okay, Craig, if you say we have to have him on, we have to have him on. Yeah. So you are now here. And before we get into the building that you're doing in Toronto, how did you get into the Yacht Week? What were you doing with Yacht Week? How old were you? And what was going on? Like, how did you get there?
This is based on what we were just talking about before we went live. Me and my friends, we were all single at the time, and we were looking for a fun adventure. So we ended up going to Croatia how old was I? I was 29 at the time. We got a yacht, did the whole Yacht Week life up. It was wild.
And that's fun. When it's like, isn't it like 30? Like when I see it out on the water, I feel like it feels like maybe it's 100 boats, but what is it, like 30 boats altogether?
No, it was like 60 boats.
Oh, it's 60.
Yeah.
Oh, it is that many.
No,
okay.
It's crazy. At one point there was a party on one boat, and it was literally kind of sinking into the water because there's way too many people on it. To the point that people had to just jump off. It was getting dangerous.
So these are all these catamarans that are going out.
There's catamarans, and I don't know exactly what they're called, like the single hull one.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So catamarans hold, I think, 12 people, and the single ones can hold up to 8 people.
Is there anyone like supervising? Like, who's driving all these boats? You guys aren't. No, so there are captains of each boat that are out there.
Yeah, there's a skipper for each boat, so they're the person in charge of maintaining.
And is that
sure you're
it?
alive.
There's no one else supervising this thing.
There's organizers and all that stuff, and there's also you can get someone who cooks you food. Effectively.
Oh, you can pay extra for that.
Yeah. Otherwise, you have to cook your own food. Like there's a stove, or you can go.
Did you guys cook your own food? Or?
No, we had someone to take care of us. We were little babies.
First class. So all your meals are prepared. Someone's driving the boat. And then I remember seeing pictures where all the boats will make a circle. Yeah. Did you do that?
Yeah, it's called circle raft. Yeah.
And then there's like a DJ in the middle.
DJ stands in the middle, and they're like 1, 2, 3. They turn on the music, and everyone jumps in at the same time. There's a bunch of floaties. Everyone's drinking in the water. Champagne's popping.
Do you just barely survive this week?
Oh, I was sick most of it because you're just drinking so much. It's a ludicrous time.
Drinking in the sun, and it's hot in the summer. I don't know if you caught a bit of real. It can go over 40 out there on the water.
It was very hot.
And then you're in the water.
You're just drinking and hoping to be all right.
Wow. Yeah, we see it. And it's funny. We were just talking that we were on one of the islands that you stopped on this island, Brač, and there's this place, Bol, on this island. And we're having lunch, and a bunch of these boats pull in. Like, it was only a small portion of them, or some of the other ones had left. I don't really know what was happening. But Nick, my brother, was just, freaking out about what is that? What is going on? Because there's flags on all these boats from different countries. And then my son, so I think Nick wanted to go with my son, who's 21. He's like, Aiden, why don't we go on this thing? But I think Aiden would like to go with his buddies. But it's a hard sell, because if you're from here, it's a difficult place to get to, and no one really understands what's happening. How did you convince your buddies to do this?
I don't even know how it came up. It just, one of us heard about it, and we were just talking about it for maybe a year, and then we're like, let's just try it. Let's just go. But it's a lot of Europeans for sure, but there's a ton of people from the States. There's Australians, there's people from South America. Everyone brings their own flag, and they're flying it on their boats. It's with that many boats, it looks just wild. One time we were out on the islands, and this Yacht Week thing pulls up, and some guys, I think they were from like Yale or something in the States. And they were test piloting this thing where you go in the water with like a jetpack, and it blows water underneath you. Like now these things are everywhere. This is like 10 years ago or more, 15 years ago or something. And they were flying around the water, and it was like the pilot, and they're like, we're going to license this thing. And we're like, what is this Yacht Week? Who are these people? What is happening? I always wonder if the locals hate it or love it, or a combination of the two. I think they're just used to it. They don't have much of an economy out there. So I think they're just kind of used to madness on those islands during the summer months, right? It brings a lot of money in for sure. For sure. On one of the islands, I'll never forget, we had the kids, and we had stopped on this island, and we had a nice this was on Hvar. And that's a beautiful island. It's a beautiful island. And I guess we stopped maybe when there was like this,
when is it? DJ shows up and he's there for a few days, like a festival, like a DJ thing. I forget.
Ultra?
Ultra.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and we didn't know Ultra was going on. So we book this hotel, and it's me, Nick's family. We all have young kids at this point, and my brother-in-law.
All right.
There's 3 families, all of us with young kids. The air conditioning in this hotel broke down. It was like 42 during the day.
Oh my God.
And at one point I opened the little bar fridge. I stick my head in the bar fridge because I couldn't cool down at night because we had these crappy little fans that they were trying to give us. And Ultra was going on, and it was 4 a.m. And I guess there's a fort at the top of this place. And I guess the DJ was up there and they're playing music. And it was 4 a.m. and I could hear the beat like it was just right next to me. Like boom.
The bass travels.
Boom. Yeah. So I just opened the window, put my head out like just in complete exhaustion and desperation. I'm like, I don't know. Do I go out and start partying with these? Like, what do I do right now? Because I'm like, the kids are exhausted. Everyone's overheating. So I wouldn't recommend for a family to go to that island during Ultra.
No.
That is not the right place.
They do a yacht week with Ultra also. That's just
do they?
Like a complete, but yeah, that sounds like next level insane.
Now we always miss Ultra purposely by 2 or 3 days. Good. And it's funny when we miss Ultra, if we're coming in and flying in at the airport, you always see from Ultra like 2 or 3 20-year-olds just sleeping like it looked like for 3 days at the side of the airport because they missed their flight and they can't get out of the country or something like that.
I would avoid it now at this point in my life as well.
Yeah, it looks fun if you're young. Anyway, we are here to discuss many different things with you. Can you tell everyone what are you up to with Green Street Flats? Like, what are you doing? How did you get started with this? Give us a bit of background. What are you up to right now?
Sure, yeah. So with Green Street Flats, we're building missing middle housing in Toronto right now, potentially expanding elsewhere. What missing middle is housing that doesn't fit, your single family home, and it doesn't fit into the condo. So something that falls in between that is missing middle. What we focus on is 5 to 30 unit places. We're building new from scratch. Some of them are renovations, but they're heavily renovated. And up to this point, it's all been rental. And we're going into neighborhoods in prime neighborhoods within Toronto, finding deals opportunistically, getting entitlements through a cumbersome process, shall we say, and building it, leasing it up, and owning, operating.
You're keeping possession of these properties, these rentals?
Yes.
Who the heck are you? How did you get started? This is a family business that started with this thing? If you have to take the call, don't worry. Take the call. You just have to share it with everybody on the podcast so you can hear your discussion.
No.
Yeah, how did you get started in this? So how old are you right now?
I'm 33.
Okay, yeah. How did you get into this?
So I got started with, so it was 2017, and it was, they just changed the mortgage rules. So there was a dip in the market, if you remember that.
I do, yeah.
And sorry, maybe I should backtrack before this. I didn't get into real estate out of nowhere. So after I finished undergrad, I joined a firm that was doing private lending, learned that business, went off with a partner. We did that for a number of years before I did any of this. So we would broker and sometimes lend our own funds to single family homeowners or developers who would do flips, first, second mortgages privately from 2012 till kind of started tapering that down around 2017, 2018, because it got quite busy and the rates started to go down relative to the risk. So that's kind of background to that. I also, in the middle of that, I did JD MBA. So I have some education background in terms of kind of working my way around the laws, bylaws, and all that stuff. So.
And what was your undergrad in?
Business. Yeah. So I went to undergrad. I went to Schulich at York, and for master's and JD, I went to University of Toronto. So 2017 happens, and I was looking around. Like I had some money saved up. I wanted to buy an investment property. The market was insane. Looked in Hamilton. Went to Buffalo, even looked at places there.
Whoa.
Yeah, I was driving back and forth over the border because they had really good high cap rates compared to us.
Yeah.
But then I had a family friend that lives in Buffalo, so she connected me to a real estate agent, and we'd look around these places, and the numbers looked really good. But then when I kind of calmed down and thought about it, I'm like, how the hell am I going to operate something out of Buffalo. It's way too far. So prices calmed down. Saw a place. It was on Broadview Avenue, north of the Danforth. It was basically a burnt down 2.5 story single family home. By burnt down, I mean there was a shell, and everything inside the insurance company had taken out, and there was a coach house in the back. So I saw it, and I said, "Oh, easy peasy. Each floor can be its own unit. You know, basement, ground, second, third, done." And there's a coach house. I didn't know anything about the approvals process.
The coach house on the back end, was there a laneway or no?
No laneway.
No, there was a coach house back there, but
historic coach house. It's just been there for like 100 years. Old, looks really cool inside the way we fitted it out at the end of the day. But it was just, everything was just burnt. They literally were selling it. The lady was too old to deal with rebuilding it. So yeah, I had no idea about any of the entitlements process. I kind of just, it's a good deal. Just got it.
That's how it starts.
Yeah. Took 3 years to get all of the finalized approvals, all that kind of stuff. But did that. It went really well. Refinanced it. I did a single family flip during that period as well.
Where was that? Also
in Toronto.
Okay.
In the annex. Rolled that into another 2 projects. Basically, kind of organically refinancing. I've since brought on some investors on certain projects. And yeah, that's what we've been doing.
So now you have a company that basically just goes around, finds opportunities within Toronto, and you're focusing on building this missing middle type of product.
Correct.
Which is a multi-unit where you are finding lots, maybe 2 lots together. Is it 1 lot, 2 lots together?
It depends. We've done, so a lot of the projects have been 1 lot. Some of the projects have been assembling lots.
And what can you build on 1 lot?
Again, depends. Like there's such variety.
What's the biggest thing you've built on 1 lot?
The biggest thing that we've built on 1 lot thus far is 10 units, but that was a double lot, which we severed into 2 and 5 units on each.
Oh, wow.
Lots. Yeah.
And then what is the biggest thing you've ever built?
That's the biggest one that we've actually constructed. Okay. The biggest approval that we have thus far is for 27 units. It's also in Toronto. It's for like called a low-rise apartment building, focusing on everything that we do is focused on neighborhoods, because my thesis is that neighborhoods are underserved from a standpoint of multifamily, because I don't know Oakville as well, but in Toronto particularly, we have what's called the yellow belt. So all of these neighborhoods that are just historically single family homes, and then a ton of density on these major streets. Well, a lot of people want to live in neighborhoods, but they can't necessarily afford the single family homes, or they want to rent in these single family home neighborhoods because it just feels homier.
They're nice neighborhoods.
There's, I think psychologically for a lot of people who grew up here, there's something about living in a house form or low rise form building rather than a high rise that makes it feel more homey. Just because it reminds them of childhood. It's just how the human psychology works. So go into those neighborhoods and we densify into more than 4plexes, so multiplexes, if you will. The idea is not novel. It's not, it's a multiplex.
No, but the product that you're building is really nice. Like these are modern, beautiful looking multifamily units.
Yes, because usually when people think of multiplexes, they're nothing against students, and we've had students living there, but just more rundown places that have just existed, are like 30, 40 years old, not necessarily.
Oh, geez. One of my friends lived in a 100-year-old house by Hamilton and McMaster. When I went to visit him, he's like, okay, here, he had to get something. And I'm like, where are you going? And he's like, well, that's my bedroom is. And he went past the furnace, like he had to duck under HVAC through the furnace room. And there was a curtain. There was a curtain tied to some exposed HVAC that like was the door to his bedroom that you had to duck under. I'm like, dude, this is where you live and you pay rent?
Yes.
And he goes, yeah, it's actually a pretty good deal. Like he was happy with it. Yeah. But I remember just being shocked. It was this area behind the furnace room that someone had turned into like a bedroom that they were renting out. I don't think things are as bad as that now in Hamilton. There's still crazy stuff. Yeah. But when you say student rentals can be run down, you are building, I would think, the opposite of what someone would envision. These are beautiful properties.
Thank you.
How are you getting along with the neighbors in the area. So I'm sure everyone's opposed to what you're doing.
Why do you think so?
Just because humans are always difficult. So are you just kind of going to the city? Like, are you building, how, I guess, are you presenting this to get it passed? Because you're having to rezone these properties, no?
Rezoning in a way, not necessarily a rezoning application, but minor variances.
Minor variant. Okay, so how are you getting the approval on these minor variances?
That's a great question. It's
you don't have to reveal all your secrets either, but I am curious because this is a challenge.
That's literally the secret. It's not even secret sauce. That's the most challenging part of it, frankly. So I would say that it's a combination of proactively, and it varies, I should say, project by project, because it just depends on who the neighbors are, right? Some neighbors just happen to be more understanding of these type of typologies, and I think a lot of it from what we've seen is actually age related. So younger families are more open to this because I think they're coming out of multifamily living in one way, shape, or form, and maybe they bought their first house. So I think that's where it's coming from, but I'm not sure. But definitely people who have lived in a neighborhood for 20, 30, 40 years, a lot of them have concerns, not necessarily opposed, but concerns, because it's change, right? And change is scary. So the way that we approach it is we try to talk to the neighbors, explain to them what we're doing prior to hearings. Sometimes that goes well, sometimes it goes horribly wrong.
And by this, talking to them, you're knocking on their door, you're leaving a letter in their mailbox?
Knocking on the door.
Knocking on the door.
Literally knocking on doors.
Okay.
Yeah. So the way that it works, at least for a committee of adjustment, is the city sends out notices for what someone's going to be doing to a radius, I believe it's 60 meters around the property. So you go around the whole block, knock on as many doors as we can, not just once, multiple times, because you don't know when someone's going to be there. And sometimes we leave letters, sometimes we don't. Show them, walk around, show them plans. This is what we're thinking of doing. Is this okay? Any input, support?
Show them plans, and they are beautiful looking properties you're building, so that probably helps.
That helps.
It doesn't look just like a rectangle, like you're building something with a bit of character here.
Yeah. I would say it helps. Sometimes we give references to other neighbors who have been who have been fine with us and who supported us from the very beginning, and who they're living beside our properties and they don't have any issues, right? Because I think the fear is, we're going to take the single family home. And in a case of a single family home, often they're not. There's sometimes units in there already, but you're going to make them larger, change them. Something's going to go awry. There's going to be, garbage issues. Parking used to be a very big one, but now City of Toronto removed the parking minimums. So yeah, it's a little bit of a.
Are as of right triplexes allowed in Toronto right now? No.
Yes.
That got passed.
Not in every single area yet.
Oh, okay.
I think they're just finalizing it.
Okay.
But
that'll be huge.
Yes. I know
you're doing more than triplexes, but it's a step in the right direction for the city.
For sure. The issue with Toronto, at least from our perspective, the numbers on the rental side, it's very difficult to make work with just 3 or 4 units. Mm-hmm. Land prices are very expensive. It depends on what area you're going into also. Like some areas, it could work, like more periphery areas, but we like to be kind of call it more Class A. Mm-hmm.
You're choosing nice spots. So that's how you deal with the neighbors and start to get them on board.
Yes.
When some of them are not on board and you get to the city, how are you, I guess you've lost sometimes too, I would imagine. But how are you winning? What are you telling the city that you have found is useful?
Yeah. So even before we're doing that, we're approaching the city, having conversations with planning and making sure that we're on side with them. I don't like to do things that are, in opposition to the city.
And are they generally supportive?
Depends on the project for the most part. Okay. Yes.
Why would they not be? What do you hear when they're not supportive? They just don't like what you're building there?
It's too much.
It's too much.
So we have a project. We had a project in the East End, which we haven't finished. We haven't built yet, but we got the approvals for at Committee of Adjustment. But in that one, that's the 27 unit apartment. They just thought the side yard setbacks they wanted to see more side yard setbacks, because you got to remember the bylaws they're quite old. Like I think they're from the early 2010s, if I remember correctly. So they have requirements for like 2.5 meter side yard setbacks, which, they weren't saying that we need to do that, but those are very difficult to do in Toronto where lots are generally smaller, right? So they look at those numbers and they're saying, well, you're triggering a massive variance by not following 2.5 meter side yard setbacks. We need to see more. But if you push in your building too much, again, the numbers stop working, because the construction costs have obviously skyrocketed. So that's the only case where we've been offside with the city, and the other times, planning supportive, because they're really seeing this type of housing as one of the
need,
and one of the solutions to the underhousing that we have in the city.
Well, have you had to sell a property that you couldn't build on, that you just couldn't get them on board with?
No.
Okay, so you've always won, or you've just had to probably change your plans, I assume.
We've had to change our plans. We've lost the committee of adjustment a few times. Okay. We've had to go to TLAB, which is the appeal body, 3 times. Knock on wood.
You've won?
Won so far.
Yeah, awesome.
So but we have had to iterate and change things if we end up at a appeal hearing. The other thing that has changed very recently with, I think it's called Bill 23, the one that the Ford just passed. They took away the ability for a neighbor to appeal a committee of adjustment decision, which was really huge for us. So what would happen before is most of the time we'd win a committee of adjustment, but then all it took is one
person to appeal it.
$300.
Yeah, disaster.
So the one that we're finishing to build right now, that 10-unit project that I was saying, that was appealed by one of the neighbors. We had won a committee of adjustment, appealed it, and it was all happening during COVID as well. So the initial approvals got delayed by 8 months to get to committee of adjustment because everything was shut down. The city couldn't work. Add on top of that, the appeal, which was super delayed because, again, everything just was backlogged. So that was another 18 months. So it took a long time to get the approvals for that project. And in some cases in those hearings, if the neighbors want to kind of stack up against you, meaning spend a lot of time, talking and emoting rather than talking about planning arguments, which is typically what happens, that can span many, many days. So in that case, the hearing lasted 7 or 8 days, which is more than it would typically last for a high rise, frankly. Now that was a particularly egregious situation. That neighbor did a lot of messed up stuff in that hearing, to the point that we were able to get a significant, probably I think the biggest cost award ever granted against them. But it's a huge delay.
How does a cost award work?
A cost award is similar to in court. If someone sues you and it's...
So they actually had to pay for some of your costs to go through this?
Minimal amount of it, but it's just they were doing some egregious stuff.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us what they were doing?
Just comments throughout the hearing.
They're being
mean, like making it last a lot longer than needed to be, vexatious. It was all kind of on purpose stuff.
How have you found the contractors that you're working with? This is like another area. Does that come from some family connections or something? I'm just trying to figure you out. Like you're a young guy who's going into Toronto, building these things there's much need.
Yeah.
There is a missing middle. Yeah. You're solving this problem. It feels like you're just rolling into this pretty easily. I understand there's tons of challenges. I'm not trying to say this is easy at all, but you're doing a really wonderful job here. How are you finding the contractors and builders and architects? Like, where's this network coming from?
Trial and error. So the contractor, so I have a construction manager who works with me. On that first project, I don't even remember how many, a lot of different.
Is this the Coach House project?
The Coach House project. Okay. Yeah, the one that was burnt down.
Yep.
Met a ton of different people. And I was recommended, the person who I work with now, by a family friend. He does security systems, and he's done a bunch of projects as a security guy for the contractor who I work with.
Awesome.
Now.
Okay.
So I don't know, I just met him and I just had the best feeling about him. My biggest fear was, how do you trust someone with such a important process, right? Especially if your thesis is to hold these things. If they screw up, and I don't have any construction background, right? So if they screw up something behind the walls, you're screwed, right? Clueless. Right? So I just had such a good feeling about this person that he's trustworthy and he'll never rip me off. And again, thank God I went with him and been working with him since 2017. Numerous projects. He's a blessing.
And then I don't know what you can share, what you want to share, but how are you raising money? You're going to your network and saying, hey, I got this project. Here's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
So it's like a big joint venture.
Yeah.
You're starting a new corporation for each project.
Yeah. There's definitely nominee corporations for the projects, and it's just within my network thus far.
Okay.
Been doing joint ventures.
Awesome. So you're presenting the opportunity. Here's what I'm building. Here's how the numbers are going to work.
Yeah.
Do you want in? You have friends, family through your network giving you money to go and help build these things.
Yeah.
And you're keeping them and they're part owners of this project?
Correct. Yeah. And then the accounting just works. Once it's done, recapitalized, money's returned back on a pro rata basis. And then afterwards, as it's cash flowing, if you've done your job right, it gets a portion.
And what are you seeing in rents right now on some of these projects? Are you seeing rents? Could you give us a ballpark on one of the buildings? It could be a past project, like for a 1-bedroom unit, a 2-bedroom. I don't even know what the size of the units are. Can you just ballpark to paint the picture for people?
Sure. Yeah. We actually focus on larger units than 1-bedroom, typically like 2 or 3-bedroom. Partially because that's the way the floor plate works out best, and partially because I think there's just a dearth of that product in the city. I would say,
especially the 3 bedrooms, I'd imagine.
Yeah, yeah. And because we're stick framing everything, there is definitely added cost to building an extra bedroom, sure, but relative to, again, more of a concrete high-rise construction, the relative incremental cost is a lot less. So we can deliver that product for reasonable amounts of money relative to that high-rise product. So in terms of ballpark rents, they'll really range.
I get it. I know it's a loaded question.
Yeah, no, it's fine. So for I would say ballpark, like 3-bedroom would be going for around $4,000 right now.
Holy shit! Yeah. That's what it's going for in Toronto.
Yeah, 2 bedrooms are like around 3 to 3.5 right now.
Holy shit. Okay. So I don't know. I don't have all the math in front of me, but I can see how you build something large enough, you're going to be able to get the numbers on this thing to work. So you build this, you have partners in it, you recapitalize, meaning you're going to some financial institution saying, all right, we now have a finished project.
Yes.
Are they rented? They're rented out by this point?
Yes.
They're rented out. We have income on this thing. Will you lend against it? Maybe First National, or is First National not interested in this stuff?
No, First National, we've done deals with First National.
So First National will come in. All right, we will lend against it, and then you're set from there. Wow.
Yeah.
Really kind of cool.
Yeah. And again, it just depends on your inputs are obviously your land cost, what you bought the place for, what it took, the interest, any approval, soft costs. The time. And then construction costs, right? And
material and labor both going through the roof.
Yeah.
Supply chain problems on material. There's
it was
a lot
really
of things you're dealing with here.
Yeah, it was really messed up in 2021. We were going through finishing or working through a build, and that was a tough one because everything was all over the place. Everything took a lot longer. So a project that would take us 9 months took 14, which is not horrible relatively speaking, but 14 to 9 months on a percentage basis, that's a big jump.
Huge.
Yeah. So carrying costs and all that gets affected as a result. So you just have to be careful, right? If you careful in the sense of enough buffer and meat on the project to safeguard against those things. And now, the big challenge is the interest rates, because I don't think many people were going into projects, at least type of stuff that we're doing a year ago, being like, it's going to go up by 4%, literally, people were locking in at sub 2s on CMHC loans at one point. And now, if you're able to get at, it's all above 4s effectively right now. So it's wild.
And how are you adjusting for that going forward? I guess now you're planning for the higher interest rates. Is the higher interest rates now just cost preventative altogether, or are you just building in the extra cost through the whole project and you can still get enough rent income from this to make it work?
So part of it was we just never priced in those low interest rates as in our performance.
Oh, so from the beginning you were just using higher rates.
We just thought it was so low, and if you're gonna if you need that rate to make a project work, I thought it was way too risky to go into something. Because the biggest risk, the way that I see it at least with real estate, is if everything goes well, you can make good money over time, but it's a place where people make a lot of money and lose a lot of money, and a lot of people don't talk about the losses. And because you have to,
you can lose money in real estate.
Yeah, surprise!
Holy shit! Okay, tell us more. Yeah. Yeah, interest rate change. Yeah, this is how our family. So you don't know this about us, but like our family almost lost everything because rates went up. Our father was flipping. He ran a drywall construction company,
right?
And rates went up in 1990, which is wait, how old are you? You're not born.
I was born in
1990. Okay, you're born right in 90. Okay, so right at that time, our family really struggled because rates went through the roof. In a 30-day period, they went up 2.9% on our family in 30 days.
Wow!
And a house that he was buying in Mississauga to flip. Bought it for $750,000. It went down within 4 months to, we think, $450,000. Wow. We couldn't afford the loss. We rented it out, losing $1,000 a month. We almost lost everything. Nothing was moving. Starter home category was moving.
Yeah.
Like a starter home house, but like this was 4,400 square feet, 3-car garage, Mississauga Road in Eglinton. Mm-hmm. Complete standstill.
Yeah.
Nothing moved. So that taught us the lesson of like, wow, our biggest variables here are, you can look at everything. You can look at supply, you could look at demand, but the biggest thing we need to look at is interest rates, because that's a variable we can't control. And then that got us into macroeconomics, because we're like, oh my gosh, Canada's interest rates are often dictated by what the US does. Yeah. And for us to understand what the US is doing, we need to understand their economy.
Right.
And then that leads you into global macroeconomics of like, well, what's going on with oil and what happens with oil supply? You know, like it kind of leads you down this path. Yeah. And as a sophisticated real estate investor, we feel you need to look into all this stuff because it's going to affect your project in Toronto, Hamilton, Whitby, Barrie.
100%.
You know, what happens with, supply chains in China and in Europe is going to affect you on the street in Toronto.
100%.
And it took us a while to kind of like make that connection.
Yeah.
But that is the way we try to protect ourselves. We're like, hey, what the hell is happening with interest rates? Where can they go?
Yeah.
And I even with all that analysis the last couple of years, I just didn't expect them to go this high. I was like, with this,
not many people did.
No, I'm like, this much debt in the world. And now we're starting to see the breaking. We're starting to see some of the bank runs going on. We're starting to see the cracks. There's an insurance company today as we're recording where their credit default swaps, the insurance on their debt is going up through.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it's skyrocketing. So we're starting to see these cracks. Yeah. I just thought they would have happened already 6 months ago.
Yeah. And what the scary part is that the cracks are from the raises that happened 6 months ago.
6 months ago.
So we don't know what the effects of these raises.
Well, we don't know in 6 months from now. Like I remember with the great financial crisis, I feel like it was the spring. Okay, I don't have the data in front of me, so I might be messing up, but I think it was Bear Stearns in the spring.
March.
Was bought out. Yeah, it was forced to be bought out. And then Lehman, I think, hit
September.
Yeah, like it was months later.
Yes.
So now I'm seeing this hit and I'm like, brace yourselves because of this fall. Like there might be a domino we don't see this fall. But I also think that domino this fall might be the trigger for interest rates to come shooting back down.
Yep.
Where the central banks come back in and say, oh my gosh, for your safety and our safety and the safety of everything, here we go. We got to drop rates, but who knows? Yeah, I took us off on a tangent there.
No, but it's a very interesting point. I like to think about these things as well, and I'm no economist, but the playing that out a little bit is even if they do lower rates, but we still haven't beat up inflation. Then we're in a world. They have to beat this. And like, this is where it's so interesting to me holding hard assets, because I believe that you're kind of in this weird win-win situation that like it's a pain in the ass to build properties what you're doing in Toronto. You have to deal with labor costs and skyrocketing material costs, the whole bit. Yeah.
But if they don't beat inflation and they lower rates, hard assets are really going to benefit in dollar terms.
Yeah.
And I feel like if they beat inflation, they're going to have to raise rates so much higher because it seems like they haven't beat it yet.
Yeah.
That it's going to create this financial crisis somewhere that I don't know where. Like, I didn't know there was going to be bank runs on Silicon Valley Bank, but there's going to be a financial crisis somewhere that is going to then require some sort of easing.
Yes.
And I don't know if it'll be quantitative easing or drop in rates or what it will be. And what we are talking about with our team is that we can expect to see more loose money policy even in the world of higher rates. So, for example, the Liberal government proposed their budget yesterday.
Right.
And I'm not trying to get into politics at all, but they basically said, we're proposing a $250 for singles or $430 for a family for grocery rebate money. Have you heard of this?
No,
So they're proposing yesterday in the budget. It's not approved, but they're saying we're going to do a grocery rebate, and 11 million Canadians will qualify.
Wow. So it's kind of targeted helicopter
but
money,
it's exactly. So it's I think they said it's going to cost them 2.1 billion or something. And I'm like, okay, well, we don't have this as a country saved.
Right.
So now we are going to take on more debt, create more new monetary units, devalue the currency further. Everyone's going to look around and say, well, great, I got one grocery bill paid for, but why is everything going up in price still? So we're in this kind of debt cycle trap at this moment where you almost need to grab onto hard assets for dear life, whether you believe in real estate or not. It's what's also led us down the path in the great financial crisis, down the gold path. It also what led us into Bitcoin. We don't have to get into the whole Bitcoin thing because
I got some Bitcoin.
Yeah. So do we. So we're that's a full Bitcoin node sitting right here.
Oh, there you go.
So it just feels to me that any way you cut it, it leads to higher value in hard assets. And then for somebody like you building what you're building, you're hitting, like, to me, this really interesting sweet spot where the big developers don't play in your world. The person who's doing a single family flip or like a custom build is really not competing against you. You've found this niche that I feel like has great legs and that you can benefit from for however long you want to do this. Is that how you're viewing this opportunity in front of you? And what are you thinking for the next few years? Keep doing what you're doing? What's your plan going forward?
So, I mean, that's exactly how I see it. It's an interesting niche that is largely overlooked. So I think we're going to be focusing on continuing to grow the asset base, kind of going, hopefully, instead of going project by project in terms of the fundraising, to go to more of a fund model where we can hold numerous assets altogether.
Because you said project by project before we were recording, you were saying it's a bit of a pain in the ass raising project by project.
Yeah, it takes time, and it's time that you can, if you have a certain amount of capital, which you're, call it not fully in control of, but more so in control of, right, rather than running around for every single project, you can use that time to find new deals and make sure that the existing projects are successful, right? It just opens up time.
And you'll take on, I guess, just the legal framework. There was a time with this business where we were approached by a few people downtown and say, hey, why don't you just turn your whole business into a fund? And the reason we didn't go down the path at the time is I don't think we were the people that were capable to do it, quite frankly. I just don't think our minds were like there. Just in speaking to you, I think you're very capable in doing that. There was a crazy legal costs just to set up the fund and go down that process. But so you're weighing that whole thing and thinking it's still worth it, that you can go down and set up the infrastructure to do this, even though it might be a big pain in the ass. The benefits outweigh those pains.
Well, there's a ton of different funds, right? So there's ones that are more public, private, different reporting standards for each one, right? So there's different pain in the ass thresholds, if you will.
So you would keep yours private?
I think private for the foreseeable future would be the ideal. And also, it's just, speaking frankly, it's way too small to be even considering anything public related.
Sure.
And
well, you don't know where it leads, but sure.
Yeah.
Out of the gates, you're going to start private.
Yeah. And the reporting standards are very arduous for public, right? And the other avenue that we want to explore more so is major avenues that are still within neighborhoods. So that's a ton of streets in Toronto are within that yellow belt. So they have just a bunch of single family homes, but they are a major street, like a 23 meter right of way. So why in God's green earth are we just building single family homes there? We should be allowing for some additional density there. And I guess the third thing is potentially looking outside of Toronto.
And why would you ever consider looking outside of Toronto?
Just in terms of the numbers. So it was very, very difficult to do anything in mid 2021 till when things froze in 2022, because the land values were insane in Toronto and everything was just jumping up and up and up. And for most of our product, we were competing against either an end user who will always overpay, not overpay, but will pay.
Sure, it's their family home.
They're thinking about it different. And at that time, also, renovators or flippers or custom home builders who were looking at it, and they were. I think at least what they were thinking in their head is, prices have gone up 20%. They're going to go up 20% next year. So I can buy it for this amount, and
it's easy.
If it grows by 20%, I'm good, right?
Yeah.
Versus we're very conservative in those numbers, so we just couldn't make it work, and it was just getting outbid. So
you're going down the path. So I'm born in Toronto, but grew up in Mississauga. Nick and I both grew up in Mississauga. Right. But when we started investing, we just got pulled into McMaster into some student rentals. Actually, Nick was flipping in Mississauga,
right?
But we got pulled to the student rentals, and that kind of made us look at outside of Toronto for the first time. Because growing up in Mississauga, there was this kind of view of Hamilton, like why would you ever go to Hamilton, Ontario, right? Then when we looked at Hamilton, we're like, wow, this is like a weird arbitrage opportunity, and it's what led us into rentals in Hamilton. Was that we realized the prices are quite substantially different than Etobicoke, Mississauga, that kind of area where we grew up, but the rents are not as different.
Yes.
The percentage isn't as big of a drop in the rent. So we're like, is this just like an inefficient arbitrage opportunity where no one's taking advantage of it?
Yeah.
And we went through this 10-year window of like, we thought we were crazy and maybe being a bit too conservative because we thought, what are we missing here?
Yeah.
And I feel like when you're in Toronto, sometimes you just don't see the opportunities. And I think some of these, what I would call tertiary areas around the GTA, are almost just being swallowed up by Toronto.
Right.
And now I almost look at Hamilton, or even on the east side, Oshawa or Barrie, almost as just suburbs to Toronto.
Yeah.
And their rents are very strong.
Yes.
So I could see why you would want to go to some of these communities, or perhaps even further and do whatever you want, even out there. But the opportunity seems pretty obvious to me.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing, with rental condo. Like, I have a friend who does condos, and they focused on Waterloo for years, killed it. Right? No one was looking at it. It was just a bunch of single family homes, and they were just building these student condos, but students were there.
Yeah.
They were killing it. They're doing stuff in Kingston. They're doing stuff in Hamilton. Large projects for these municipalities that were overlooked for a really long time.
And it's interesting you bring up students, because over the last few years, universities are just killing it because they're going outside of Canada and saying, hey, if you want status in Canada, here's the way to do it. You don't have to go through a regular immigration process. Get accepted to our college or our university. The universities love it. They charge like triple or whatever it is for tuition. And they're bringing in tons of foreign students. The foreign student body in here has, like, Nick has the actual number. It's like quintupled since 2015. So these universities are just bursting at the seams.
You go in at the airport where you're landing, and there's like that room.
I just walked by it. Yeah.
There's a room where all the students are waiting to I don't know what happens.
I don't know either. We just got off a flight from the Dominican, and there's this big yellow sign. It says students this way, and a big arrow. And then there's another sign like students pointing this way. I'm like, oh my gosh, we are now gearing ourselves up for the arrival of, there's so many students at the airport. And then when you land and you got out in the terminal, there was like this little, it was closed. It was late at night, but there was like this student welcome center thing. I guess it would help you get to the right location for your university or college. So Canada has just like a second immigration path that it's getting more attention now, but for years it hasn't been discussed.
Well, it's great. I mean, in terms, you're bringing in young people. We don't have enough young people being born in the country, so we have to supplant that some sort of way, or else all of our real estate dreams are going down the
You're right. We're not good at productivity. We're not good at innovation in this country. We're good at taking people from around the world and stuffing them in here, and it produces stuff. But if it's going to produce, I'd imagine your parents are immigrants?
Well, I wasn't born here either.
You weren't born here either.
No.
When did you come here?
when I was 1. So I grew up here.
Okay, I was going to say your English is so strong. Okay, that makes sense. But yeah, look at this.
Yeah.
So this is the benefit that we all get, and it's Canada. I think having been born here, our parents are immigrants.
Yes.
I sometimes look at how this country could be so much better and what I would consider pretty easily.
Yes.
And it gets frustrating because you're like, geez, like, why are we not building the hospital capacity to match the population? Like, am I out to lunch thinking hospital capacity should match population growth? You know, like the basic
schools,
basic logical things. So you kind of get frustrated. But relative to the rest of the world, I'm constantly reminded that compared to many other places to live, this is still a very attractive place.
That's an amazing country.
And now you get grocery rebate checks.
There you go.
They also said something that the dental plan that they had planned to release is going to cost them double their anticipated analysis.
I'm so surprised.
That's exactly what my brother said. That's what he goes.
This government has never.
Goes, only double? He goes, no, give them some more time.
Yeah. They'll get there. Yeah.
So if you do, I guess I'm curious, would you ever, you mentioned Buffalo briefly, would you ever venture out into the States, and why or why not?
Oh, I have no idea. For now, Canada, I like to get into the nitty gritty of the bylaws and how everything works in order to, work within the framework and find those opportunities. I don't know those opportunities in the States. I think all I know about the States is that over the last, since 2012, the business has been buy older stock apartment building, kind of renovate, increase rents, sell, right? That's been working as a charm. But I think and I can see that with some of the publicly listed companies, that's running into problems because A, interest rates have gone up so much, and B, there's just becoming an affordability problem. There's only so many old apartment buildings that you can rehab like that. But with the States, what's interesting is their turnover is a lot higher than we have in Canada. So my understanding is 30 to 50% turnover almost every year. So it's a lot faster to do these projects versus here where we have rent control for older buildings. It's a lot harder to do that kind of stuff. But I don't have any plans for the States in the time being, but it's, you have to go there after a certain point to continue growing. The car market is small, relatively speaking, right? 1/10 the size. When one of your friends looks at what you're doing now, what would you explain to either them or somebody your age roughly that is just getting started in real estate? Is there an opportunity in exactly what you're doing, or that you're like, I'm not doing that, but if I was just starting, I would probably look at that? What advice would you give to somebody who's maybe, 5 years younger than you or hasn't begun yet? Yeah, I have some friends who want to do some, real estate investing. What I always say to them is just, I'm like, show me your numbers so I can double check them. But I always just say, have enough buffer in whatever you're trying to do that you're not so stretched that it can all go under. Because again, you have to use leverage. It's just the cost of everything is too high. And have you seen people make mistakes? Like, where have you seen them make mistakes? Is it they're trying to flip something and they're not accounting for the costs, or they're trying to buy a rental and just the numbers aren't there on the income to carry the project? Yeah, or the interest rates have gone up, like for so many people right now, and then everything's underwater, and then you're not cash flowing. You're losing money on it. So what have you spent all your time doing, right? Or costs haven't grown or during that year, like it's happening right now. People who bought in early 2022, late 2021, just not blindly, but at market at the time. The market hasn't cooperated, so it hasn't kept up with what's been happening for the last X number of years. So now people are places are just sitting and they're not selling. There's tons of examples of that. They just keep on getting relisted. I presume at a certain point they have to start selling them at lower prices because the carrying costs start getting too crazy. If you locked in your rates, then you're fine for up to 5 years, but presumably you're using some sort of leverage for the construction cost, which will, like, you got to pay those bills or else they're going to take it away. So where would you tell someone to start? Someone wants, they say, hey man, I just want to get started in real estate. I just want to get into this. I want to do something with real estate.
I know this is also a loaded question because it ties to people's goals and what they're trying to achieve. But if you just,
there's a friend of mine who I have this conversation with regularly.
Okay.
Because he's always like he's
they're chasing.
He's not chasing. He's just been trying to start. But my question is always to him, what's your goal? Like, are you? Yeah. He works at a big company, and where I see him going is he can be like a very C-suite kind of guy, and I'm like, why are you thinking on this? I think of this like small scale when you can be on that huge scale. And he's always thinking like, I want to be 100% of the small scale rather than being a small portion of the big scale.
Interesting.
Right. So it's an interesting little dynamic. But
if you had to tell,
I would say that something, again, this is from perspective of Toronto, something that is existing, built, that could be touched up in a way, like not anything super major, because so many things can go wrong with construction, and they will go wrong in construction the first time around. Where you're not going to make a killing, but if you break even or make a little bit more than that's a job well done, because especially in the market that we have today. So call it duplex, triplex, fourplex that's existing, that you can. Maybe 1 or 2 units are vacant, because oftentimes when they're selling places, people try to vacate the units to show, upside growth and rent potential, and go into those units, fix up the kitchens, fix up the bathrooms, fix up the floors, increase the rent.
So force some equity with your own work on the property.
Yeah, I would say so, because then you're protecting against doing a project that's way too big. And you can still capture some upside and see if this is even something that you like, or this works for you, right? Because it's a ton of work, and a lot of things can go wrong, and they will go wrong. And also now that they've passed, at least again in Toronto, they have laneway suites, what Craig was talking about, and they have garden suite bylaws now too. You always got to remember, like, that could be something that you can do in the future with that property. So this way, it's like a lighter touch way of getting into something. Fix it up, works. You can always add additional density by going down that route.
Do you find that people your age are thinking about owning hard assets as a vehicle to their own financial freedom, or no? It's more people are just talking about real estate as a way to get into the real estate market. Like, is this a discussion at your age people are having right now?
I think it depends on which friends. I definitely have friends.
So you do have some talking about this?
Yeah, I definitely have friends who look at it as well, this or other assets as a way to financial freedom, right? You owning things lets you have more ability to follow your pursuits, right? At some point, right? I think a lot of my friends are definitely focused on saving money to, for later on in life, the TFSAs, RSP, that kind of stuff. But I think those who can are definitely thinking about real estate as something, buying something to rent it out.
And that one friend that you had the discussion around, why he has the path to being in the C-suite of wherever corporation versus having 100% ownership of something smaller that he might start on his own. What was the argument that you used? I'm just curious. I like the way you think, for staying in the role that would get him to the C-suite. Well, and I'll tell you, I have a heavy bias for that, because I just think I would rather have 100% of the small thing because of the freedom that it potentially allows me in my life. There's all kinds of other risks going that way, but that's where my mind goes. And I'm wondering just where, how do you argue for staying on the path into the C-suite in a corporation? Yeah.
Well, my mind goes to the same place as yours does, because clearly I'm doing something very out there, if you will, and it's paving my own path. But I think it's always grass is always greener on the other side a little bit, right? So I look at it, and if you're on that path to a C-suite and being in one of the big real estate companies that have already grown, then you have the steady paycheck. You're going to be able to carry in a very large thing, and it might be a small percentage, but
you can qualify at the banks easier.
You can qualify, exactly.
Some basics.
Yeah, exactly. There's just that stability, and I think it really depends on your psychology and your family situation, frankly, how much you need that. I don't get a paycheck every 2 weeks. That's just not how I'm set up. Would I kill? So project goes well, I'm good.
You're eating steak. If it doesn't, mac and cheese. Mac and cheese.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, some ramen noodles. So I think it's just being very comfortable with the risks of what comes with it. So that was my whole point with him. It wasn't dissuading him from doing it. And I don't know if he would do it as like a full-time thing even. I was just pointing out that you have this path that many people aren't on. Mm-hmm. So think many times before you say bye to that path. Because again, speaking, and maybe this is a little bit of my inner thoughts probably, like I had a job in New York in big law, one of the big law firms down there. So I had that path in front of me. And then I just knew, like for me, I knew that was going to be a shitty life for me.
How did you know? What did you do mentally? You extrapolated it out to your future in that role?
Yeah, I extrapolate. Like I would look at, and this is really, I have many, many, many friends in law and many friends who are in law in New York. But so it's not like a
sure. Everyone has their own journey.
Yeah. For me, it was just looking at the partners' lives, and you know, I was being on a call at 10 or 11 p.m. and the partner's on that call, and the partners make millions of dollars a year, but they're on it all the time. So I just didn't like. I would look at that, and that's not what I wanted my life to be at. Circa 10, 15 years forward, and you would just talk to people who are into it like 2, 3, 4, 5 years in, and I don't know if I've met many, if I met even one at all, who was like, this is awesome. I love it. So I just kind of said in my mind, like if enough people are saying that this isn't ideal, let's call it, and that they're trying to get out of it, like why would I start? Like I'll just cut it right away.
Yeah, it's so funny hearing you say this. Is exactly what I went through. I was in software sales, and everybody was trying to get to these, larger account. It was called a field sales rep who had huge accounts in Toronto, and they were just killing it. The income these guys were making was absolutely huge. Yeah. But then when I saw that they couldn't take more than 14 days off on vacation, otherwise the threat was those accounts would be taken from them and handed to someone else, I just thought, this isn't the life that I want. And they were already, I guess, my age now today. Yeah. And I thought, why am I striving for a future that I actually don't want? This isn't lining up.
Exactly. I think it's very important to have those role models in your mind's eye, or maybe you actually know someone who you're like, I want like that guy's life or that girl's life.
And reverse engineer.
Yeah. It's like, this is cool. The way that they spend their time. How do I get there? And what do they do? And how do they get there? Yeah, so that's kind of how I think about it.
Leonid, pleasure meeting you, man. Really, really. Yeah. I'm a huge fan of what you're doing. I can extrapolate your future out now, and you're going to be on Yacht Week in Croatia in a very you might be on your own yacht on your Yacht Week in Croatia.
It'll be different. I'll be with my wife and
yeah. So don't go during Ultra then. Okay, that's a little tip. Just don't go there, that you are well aware of now. But for anyone listening who wants to, I don't know, at some point do business with you, interested in what you're doing. Is it the website to reach you, or I don't even know if you want anyone reaching out to you?
No. Yeah, you can reach out on LinkedIn. Just look up my name, Leonid Kotov. I go on there every now and again. So if I don't respond right away, apologies, I'll get to it.
Okay, so LinkedIn is a good way to reach you.
LinkedIn's a good way to reach me, or you can drop a line on greenstreetflats.com in the contact us page, and we have someone monitoring that.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. All the best with your next projects and developments. And I think what you're also offering to the city of Toronto is huge. I mean, you're giving back to you have a profitable enterprise that you are also contributing back to the community. And there's much need for what you're doing with this missing middle type of product. So
yes.
You're serving all of us. So thank you for that.
That's very kind of you to say. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. You can find every new episode of the Your Life, Your Term show on all the major streaming platforms. So Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. And if you'd like to get free copies of some of the books that we've put together, like these right here, or some of the reports that we've put together, like these right here, you can find all of those at www.rockstarinnercircle.com. That's www.rockstarinnercircle.com. That's it for now. Until next time, your life, your terms.